who can they listen to? And talking of a program in our organization, we have like the use of body map as an art of healing. We work with so many survivors of sexual gender-based violence. And now, like, most of them do not feel comfortable going to the police, going to the administration, because they're like, when you go there, you're told to, like, practically share your experience. How was it? How are you raped? And it harbors, like, so much pain. It harbors so much bitterness in them. So, like, in our program, we use art as a form of healing. And from a first-hand experience, the way I was saying, there is a lot of untold violence stories happening in our society.
Fair enough. Mary Liz, the hashtag is Hear Me, but I wonder, is the world hearing?
The world is trying, but it's not yet hearing. You see, if the world was hearing, for instance, and I'll speak of one of the most rampant kind of sexual abuse that is happening currently, it's happening in our public transport, it's happening in public spaces, where nowadays you just, Uhuru Park, for example, you're just seated there and you're just minding your business because that's why it is Uhuru Park. You can just go there and be free, right? But a man will just come sitting near you and at your expense, they'll begin ejaculating and just doing some weird stuff out there. And you see, this is something that is happening.
Next to you at a broad daylight?
At broad daylight, next to you. And it's very traumatizing. And the saddest part is that it happened to me recently, like in a span of 3 hours, 2 times. 3 times, and I looked at it and I was like, wow, Uhuru Park has become such an unfriendly place. Given I'm an activist and a feminist, I go to Uhuru Park a lot, but I always go to Freedom Corner to gather to, you know, chant and everything. And that one time I told myself I want to go to Uhuru Park and just sit, because I was having a tough day, just sit and, you know, just think about my day and everything. And it became even harder to do that. In matatus, women are seated comfortably and a man comes with their magazine or newspaper, and it's okay to have a magazine and a newspaper, but it is used at the expense of women. And, you know, women are abused. Before you know it, the hand of a man is somewhere that is not required. You see, it is that bad. And people always think when you're talking about sexual and gender-based violence, we are speaking about, you know, rape or maybe being battered and everything. But it's as little as that. How you literally are making a woman a sexual object just because they've woken up in the morning and decided they're going to wear a short skirt. How many times do we see men walking bare-chested, men who are doing kazi ya mikono in town, and nobody even thinks for a second to stand and tell them, hey, put on something, you know? But when it comes to women, because culturally the society has objectified women and has reduced the value of women to just sexual objects, then it becomes a problem, because then that's why 1 to 3, in fact, I think it's not representative, but 1 to every 3 women goes through sexual abuse in their life. If you analyze that properly, every woman goes through sexual abuse.
McLean, you want to respond to that as well?
Okay, just to add about on the Hear Me Too, it's like a space. Do we believe the stories that these women bring? Because that is one challenge. When a woman brings their stories or wants to share their stories, the whole world is like against them. Bring facts, bring evidence. So Hear Me Too is that platform where I can just tell another woman, I can just tell a survivor, I believe you. You know, I believe you. The statement, I believe you, is healing to someone else. Just hearing them out and giving them the assurance that you believe them.
And when we talk of abuses and women being abused, is it always and every time that the abuse is meted upon by men? Or are there cases where women abuses their fellow women?
Yes, we have cases where women abuse fellow women. When we look at the perspective of intimate partner violence, when we have, for instance, queer women who are in a relationship, of course, it's women who are going to meet violence against each other, be it battering, be it intimate raping, all this perspective. And then on the bigger circle, it's the perspective of how do women treat each other. How many times, for instance, I've had cases where we are going to report a case of sexual and gender-based violence, and at the police station, the person we find is a lady, and this lady does not even take time to listen, to hear what they're being told, to record an OB, and to follow up on it. Why? Because, like she said, most of the time they'll tell you, provide evidence. And you see, the first thing, which is almost someone always knows, you're always told when you're sexually abused, the first thing is ensure the clothes that you are wearing are provided, ensure that you don't shower first before you can go for tests and everything. But I promise you, the first thing you feel is to shower.
Yeah.
Because you feel, you look at yourself, you feel dirty. In your mind, you feel dirty. Your thoughts are dirty. Everything is dirty. And for some reason, the only thing in the society that we've been taught that cleans is water. So you want water on your body. By the time you realize, or by the time you're telling it, or by the time you have to explain it to someone, they want you to provide evidence. And most of the time, it's really bad cruelty, because at the police stations, we have gender desks that don't work because police are not gender experts. They're just security experts.
We'll come to the authorities and what they're doing. Before you do that, McLean, we often mention as well of feminism in the debates of gender-based violence. Yeah. Feminism often means different things to different people. Yeah. I wonder what it means to you, McLean.
Feminism means equality and equity, getting that space to exercise my rights, because my rights are not like lesser rights compared to the other person, be it a woman, be it another man. That equal and fair space to exercise my rights, in a nutshell. Yes.
Fair enough. Hear me is often demanding that one needs to be heard. We talked of whether the world is listening, hearing, or not. You answered that. But the question is past the hearing. Is the world, is society, are authorities doing as well their job to make sure they actualize on the stories that women are telling them?
I'll start from feminism. Feminism for me is intersectionality. How you live out your life is not how I live out my life. There's that individuality perspective. For me, feminism is paying attention to that individuality and ensuring, if you're talking about these stories, bringing them to the table, you're bringing them wholesomely, because then you have to consider, for instance, a person living with disability. How many times do we sit and patiently just say, we analyze sexual and gender-based violence amongst people living with disability, you know, because disability often in the society is taken as weakness. And so then how many times are they taken advantage of? And how are we paying attention to that? And now when it comes to beyond listening, I was bringing earlier the issue of gender desks and how they're not functional. So they are there, they've been provided in the constitution and stuff, but they're not functional because, one, most police are not gender experts. And for you to be able to actually listen and analyze and be able to record chronologically on how things happened from a survivor perspective, you have to be a gender expert. You have to be able to know the right words to say, how to ensure you calm them down enough to say it, because then most of the time, by the time they're coming to report, it has just happened.
Will you then recommend that a gender desk, a gender experts, be at every police station?
Yes. In fact, I was having that conversation with a friend of mine called Diana Rose. Shout out to Diana Rose. She's all the way in the US, but she's a Kenyan and she works on a lot of feminism issues in Kenya. We were discussing and we were saying when it comes to gender desks, we need gender desks that have both men and women, because there's no assumption that men don't get assaulted or abused. So if we have two gender experts, it's easier. I am sure 100% it's easier for you as a man to speak to a fellow man about your struggles than it is for you to speak to me about your struggles, because chances, not even chances, 100% so, I'll not be able to understand you because in my life I've never been a man. I'll always be able to understand a woman because I'm a gender expert and then I'm a woman. I've been living more or less the same life as they're living. So
fair enough. On the sharing of information, it's not every time and always that we as well see abused, be it men or women, who come out to publicly or even privately share their stories with authorities. Why is there often a secrecy? Why is there a fear surrounding one coming out to share their story?
The stigma that comes around it. And I'll give a very basic example. Many women have been brought up to believe that, for instance, physical abuse, when your husband or when your partner beats you up, it's an indication that they love you. And they're like, I'll just like try and manage this relationship because he loves me and I cannot move away. I do not have any other source of income. And the stigma that is also associated with it, when the way my colleague has said here, when you go to report cases of violence, how are you treated as a survivor at the place where you've reported to? And I'll give a very, very recent example, a case I was handling last weekend. A young lady went to report an incident of concurrent gender-based violence in her relationship. And when she went to that police station, the two female police officers, first of all, they beat her up. and chased her away from that police station.
Despite her going to report an
Exactly. And she even has like screenshots of messages and the conversations and even pictures of the abuse, and the partner like confiscated her phone. And if a woman experiences, or if a man experiences such a thing one time, definitely I won't be comfortable sharing it out the other time. I'll be like, let me just hold on. And in the process of holding on, we hear of cases someone has been murdered eventually.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And there's often the question as well of believability, that women or men who have been abused report their cases, but they're not given a fair hearing in as far as the believability of the message is concerned. What kind of a challenge does the assumption that what you are telling me is not necessarily true pose in as far as reporting gender-based violent cases are concerned?
It poses many challenges, and it's a spectrum, really. Often it starts from the victim who maybe was threatened by the perpetrator, because you know most of the time, of course, the perpetrator has some power on you, or maybe they've made you believe they have some power on you, and so they'll threaten you. They'll tell you, if you tell, I'm going to do ABCD, and most of the time it happens to children, because children, when children, you warn them by telling them harsh words, and so that has been told to you, so you're scared to tell. The second thing is when you tell your family, for instance, there's this thing about sexual abuse and rape being generally sexual, gender-based violence being associated to shame, and the family doesn't want to associate themselves with that. So you're told not to say it, because when you say it out loud, people will know, and then our family will be put to shame. And so for that alone, the chain of reporting has been hindered. In the case you're lucky enough to have at least one or two people believe you from the point of you telling the family and stuff, then it is reported. Then you have the challenge of what she has said, where you go to the police station. We have even cases of women going to report and police raping them in the process. You've come from being raped, and then you go to report to a police, and then they laugh about it and say, but women are supposed to be sexual objects or something. Yeah. And in the process, you get raped again. And then because of that, chances of justice even lower. Yeah.
Fair enough. Kenya's 2010 constitution divided the country into 47 counties.
Yes.
Each county having a woman rep.
Yeah.
A symbol that was supposed to stand out and champion for women's rights and women in general in their own counties. Yeah. Do you think the newly created positions, 6 years or 7 years down the line, have impacted in the championing of women's rights?
Personally, I'll say no, they haven't. And I'm very honest about my conversations. I know it is affirmative action, but affirmative action has a perspective of lack in longevity, because then affirmative action always look at, we want the solution now, but what happens 10 years later? And I feel like we are suffering from that crisis, because I'll give an example of Nairobi. We had Shebesh initially, and when she was coming in, people were excited because she was the first one, and the excuse that was given for her not doing her job well was that it was the first experience at the job, and then we kind of understood. I never understood myself, but you see, majority wins. And then now Pasaris has come in, and the story is repeating itself. And it's really sad, because then, I'll give an example, a very current example, the story of Mugo Wairimu. In 2014, 14th September 2015, I remember clearly, we made a protest. We walked across the streets, and 2 days later, Mugo Wairimu was arrested. But shortly before a week was over, Mugo Wairimu was released.
Of course, it is a case in front of a court. We can't discuss the merits and demerits.
I'm not speaking on merits and demerits. I'm just saying on the perspective of that time, Shebesh went MIA on addressing these issues. She never spoke about it. This time, again, Pasaris has not said anything. You see, if you don't stand for something, you're going to fall for anything. And at this point, as women of Nairobi, do we know if we have her support if she hasn't said anything about it?
Which begs the question, the number of women representatives and representation is increasing. But you are telling me it's not trickling down to the average woman.
It is not trickling down, because then what we want, yes, we do want women in leadership, but we want women leaders in leadership. We don't just want women, because you can't just be saying you're a leader, you're a woman, so you're a leader. No, that you're a woman doesn't mean you're a leader, and that you're a woman doesn't mean you can't be a leader. So
equally, those who have voted are women who say they're seeking these positions of leadership, largely voted by women. So the question is as though it's going round on women being at the center as well.
It's not about largely being voted as women, and I'll try to answer the question that you brought up earlier of, are women their own enemies? Women are not their own enemies. Because who said women have to be friends, all of them? Women are also human beings. Not all of them have to be friends. And I'll give an example of a president in Kenya. What percent of votes do they need? 50 plus 1, right? And if they're going to get 50% plus 1, does it mean only men are going to vote? Because men also don't make up to 50 plus 1%, because men are 48% in Kenya currently.
Fair enough. Let me give McCrane a chance to respond to that question as well.
Personally, I think there's still a lot to be done with the women in leadership in this country. There's still a lot, way lot to be done than just talking in parliament and just like going on screens and making press statements. There's a lot to be done for women and girls back.
And on what does that a lot include?
It includes, first of all, access to resources. Like we put, in a layman's point of view, I vote a leader in because I know when it comes to access of the resources, I'll be able to get resources from whichever context, be it financial, be it educational. But now, when it comes like 2 years, 3 years down the line, you ask a woman back there, do you even know the existence of the Women Enterprise Fund?
Yeah.
They're like, I do not know such a thing exists. Do you know that you can access maybe like free maternity care? There are people who do not even know whether free maternity care exists on a very, very serious point of view. Do you know that you can have access to education funds and stuff? They do not even know. So like I vote in a leader expecting that the resources will trickle down to me. But it's vice versa, by the way. The approach is not even like bottom up. It's always top down. You pretend like you're coming here to seek the opinions of women in the ground, but honestly, you do not, I mean, their strategic and their practical needs are honestly not addressed.
Fair enough. Let me give Mary Liz the final say in this conversation. The future of women, the future of women fighting for their rights and feminism in general. If you could kindly depict for us what the future in terms of women fighting for their rights look like.
I'll say the future is female. And when I say the future is female, I do not mean men are going to be removed from the face of the earth or something. I'm saying the future is female because then one thing that is happening, beyond empowerment, there is empowerment. We are having a breed of young women who are coming up. And I was lucky enough to be in a convening last week part one, in Limuru, where it was bringing young feminists from Kenya. And I was lucky enough to spend 2 days with feminists who are as young as 17 years old.
So the future is female.
Yes, and that was very pleasant. That was very pleasant because the issues that they were speaking meant that they are powered enough that you're not worried if you actually give them a position today, they're going to do a great job. And so, yes, the future is female. And yes, we are going to get there. The journey is long, but we are going to get there.
Mary Liz Biubwa, agenda expert, Mikrina Dhiambo, programs coordinator, Trust for Indigenous Culture and Health, TICA, Kenya. Many thanks, ladies, for making time for us. Well, on that note, we are taking another short break. We'll be back with more news after this. Stay tuned.